Imagine finding out that your entire life, everything you thought you knew about yourself, was a lie. One night, Elena Reed stood in a silent boardroom, clutching a faded photograph and a silver bracelet she had worn since childhood. Across from her, the truth unfolded in shattering clarity. She wasn't just a yoga teacher from Willow Creek. She was the missing heir to a fortune buried under betrayal, stolen from her family, hidden away to erase her name. And the man standing beside her, Caleb Whitmore, the powerful CEO who had unknowingly crashed into her life 5 years earlier, was now the only person fighting to help her reclaim it. A reckless night, a forgotten dance, a silver bracelet. It all led to this moment, a moment that would rewrite everything. If you love stories of unexpected love, buried secrets, and the kind of twists that keep your heart racing, you're in the right place. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, because Elena and Caleb's story is about to take you on a ride you won't forget. Let's dive in. Some nights don't just pass, they leave fingerprints on your life, stains you can't scrub away, no matter how far you run. For Elena Reed, it began with a night like that. At 26, she lived a quiet, familiar rhythm in Willow Creek, teaching yoga classes, brewing herbal tea in chipped mugs, nursing the pieces of a heart still aching from the past, a life measured in small, safe steps, until one night, exhaustion cracked her open and the universe poured in. Elena had been unraveling slowly. The endless cycle of work, the heavy quiet of an apartment that no longer felt like home, the lingering bruises from a breakup that had shattered more than just trust, they all piled up until breathing itself felt like a weight. So when her best friend, Jenna Clark, called with an invitation to a high-profile charity gala downtown, Elena almost said no. Glittering dresses, forced laughter, strangers with perfect lives. It felt like stepping into someone else's dream. But Jenna had a way of dragging her into the light when she forgot how to find it herself. You need one night to remember you're alive, Jenna had said, and maybe. Elena needed that more than she admitted. Under the dizzy swirl of chandeliers and the buzz of champagne-laced conversations, Elena stumbled into a different version of herself. Someone braver, someone reckless, someone who wasn't defined by old scars. She didn't plan to catch the eye of Caleb Whitmore, the enigmatic CEO of Whitmore Technologies, a man whose name opened doors and closed deals. She didn't even realize who he was at first, just a stranger in a tailored suit, leaning against the bar with a weariness that mirrored her own. Their worlds should have been galaxies apart, yet somehow, in that crowded room, they collided. It wasn't meant to mean anything. A conversation, a laugh, a spark. A moment too beautiful and too broken to survive the morning. Elena thought it would be the kind of story you tuck away for rainy days, a wild thing you half believe ever happened. Caleb thought it would be a blur, forgotten by the time his car pulled away from the curb. They were both wrong, because that night left something behind. A thread that would pull them back together across years, across choices, across the carefully built walls they both swore they needed. And Elena. She didn't just leave that night with a fading memory. She left wearing a silver bracelet slipped onto her wrist by Caleb before they parted. A careless, thoughtless gesture. She kept it, buried at the bottom of a drawer, a souvenir from a night she never intended to remember until 5 years later, when that bracelet would turn her entire world upside down again. That silver bracelet, the one Elena Reed had almost forgotten, wasn't just a memento from a reckless night. It was the key to a secret so explosive. It could tear apart everything Caleb Whitmore had built. You see, Elena wasn't just a random woman Caleb had crossed paths with. She was the lost heir to Harrington Holdings, the rival empire. Whitmore Technologies had outmaneuvered decades ago. And when the truth came to light, it wasn't just about lingering glances or whispered promises anymore. It was about power, revenge, and a fortune hanging in the balance. This wasn't the kind of love story that unfolded neatly with soft music and slow dances. It was chaotic, unpredictable, stitched together with fate and secrets neither of them were ready to face. Imagine this: a woman who had spent her life believing she was ordinary, suddenly holding the future of a billionaire's empire in her hands, and a man who had built his world on control, realizing the only person he couldn't outmaneuver was the one woman he hadn't planned on wanting. It was messy, it was thrilling, and it was about to turn both their lives inside out. If you're here for a story that blends romance with a twist of chaos and a heavy dose of destiny, you're exactly where you need to be. Buckle up, because Elena and Caleb are about to take you on a ride you won't forget. Elena Reed was not having a good week. The kind of week where the universe seemed determined to see just how many things it could pile onto your back before you broke. Her small yoga studio in Willow Creek was buzzing great for business. Terrible for her sanity. The AC had given out during a heat wave. Her inbox had turned into a war zone of scheduling disasters. And sleep. A distant memory, as if that wasn't enough. Her ex, the one she'd spent months trying to forget, had decided now was the perfect time to text her, reopening wounds she thought had finally begun to heal by Thursday. Elena was stretched so thin, she felt like a ghost in her own life. So when Jenna Clark called bright, insistent, Elena almost didn't answer. She let the phone buzz once, twice. By the third ring, she caved. Jenna's voice was sunshine through a rainstorm. "I have an extra ticket," she chirped. "A charity gala downtown, free food, live music, and you, my dear, need a night out." Elena groaned into the couch cushions. The idea of slipping into a sequined dress and smiling at strangers sounded about as appealing as running a marathon barefoot. She muttered something about staying home with tea and bad rom-coms. But Jenna, relentless as ever, launched into a full-on pep talk. You need to breathe again. Elena, to laugh, maybe even flirt a little. 10 minutes later, defeated and mildly amused, Elena found herself agreeing. One night, how bad could it be? Famous last words. The gala was held at a luxury hotel in the heart of Willow Creek, all gleaming glass and glittering chandeliers. The second Elena stepped inside, she felt hopelessly out of place. Jenna had stuffed her into a borrowed black dress that clung a little too tightly and a pair of heels that felt like medieval torture devices as she tugged self-consciously at the hem. Jenna dragged her toward the bar. The ballroom was a sea of elegant tuxedos, flowing gowns, the clink of crystal glasses, and murmured laughter. Elena clutched a glass of champagne like it was a life raft and tried to disappear into the crowd, and then she saw him, standing near the dance floor, tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair tousled just enough to look infuriatingly perfect. He wore a simple black mask, as if daring anyone to try and look deeper. There was a confidence in the way he stood, not arrogance, but quiet command that pulled her gaze like a magnet. Next to her, Jenna nudged her hard enough to make her spill a drop of champagne. "Go talk to him," she hissed. Elena shook her head, laughing under her breath. Not tonight. She wasn't looking for anything complicated. But fate had other plans. Beside her, Jenna leaned in, whispering with a mischievous grin, "He looks like trouble?" In the best possible way. Before Elena could protest, the stranger, the man with the mask and the quiet, magnetic pull, turned and caught her gaze. His eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled, and without hesitation, he crossed the room toward her. Up close, he was even more breathtaking. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a voice so deep and smooth it made her forget every reason she should walk away. "I'm just a guest," he said, offering nothing more, no name, no details, only a hand, extended in silent invitation. "Would you like to dance against every shred of better judgment she had?" Elena said, yes. One dance turned into two, then three. The world faded the crowd. The noise, the worries. There was just the two of them, spinning under glittering lights. They talked about nothing and everything, the kind of effortless banter that made it feel like they'd known each other far longer than a single night. He teased her about her shaky heels, and she laughed, real, unrestrained for the first time in what felt like forever. The champagne kept flowing. Jenna disappeared somewhere into the crowd, and the night, the whole shimmering, dizzy night blurred into something softer and wilder than Elena had allowed herself in years. She couldn't remember who suggested leaving first. Maybe it was him, maybe it was her. It didn't matter. Suddenly, they were stumbling into an elevator, laughing breathlessly, stealing fleeting touches as they navigated dimly lit hallways, then a door swinging open, a hotel room, and a moment that swallowed everything else. It was reckless. It was impulsive. It was so wildly unlike her, and yet, in that moment, Elena didn't care. The weight she'd been carrying melted away under his hands, under the sound of his laugh. They shed masks, jackets, restraint. He was even more beautiful without the disguise's sharp cheekbones. A grin that made her stomach flip and her mind go blissfully blank. Neither of them asked for names. Neither of them needed to. It was an unspoken agreement, a secret, suspended outside of reality. Clothes hit the floor. Touch blurred into sensation. A night that felt like a dream she would surely wake from too soon. Hours later, they lay tangled in the sheets, city lights bleeding through the window. Elena didn't think about morning. She didn't think about anything beyond the heat of his skin against hers and the way the world felt infinitely softer here. In the space between dreams and regrets, morning crashed in like a wave. Elena woke to a pounding headache and a bed that was suddenly, achingly empty. The spot beside her was cold. Sitting up, she clutched the sheet around herself, blinking against the early light. On the nightstand, something caught her eye, a silver bracelet, simple, elegant, with tiny intricate carvings she couldn't quite make out. Beside it, a note scribbled in hurried handwriting. Thanks for the dance. No name, no phone number, just a trinket and a goodbye. She ran her fingers over the bracelet, half amused, half mortified. What had she done? Throwing on her crumpled black dress, missing a heel on one shoe, Elena slipped the bracelet onto her wrist. Somehow. It felt wrong to leave it behind. It felt like a piece of the night she wasn't ready to let go of just yet. She left the hotel with a strange mixture of regret and exhilaration twisting in her chest, telling herself it had been a one-time lapse, a crazy story she'd one day laugh about over bad coffee and cheap wine. Jenna blew up her phone, demanding details Elena wasn't ready to share. So she tucked the memory away, buried it beneath layers of normalcy, returned to her yoga classes, her cluttered apartment, her quiet, careful life. But the bracelet stayed, resting against her wrist like a secret, a reminder of the one night she had truly let herself feel free. Across town, Caleb Whitmore stirred awake in his penthouse. The sunlight poured in across gleaming floors and untouched coffee cups. He ran a hand through his tousled hair, an uncharacteristic smile tugging at his mouth. He didn't usually do things like that. He didn't disappear from women without so much as a goodbye. But last night hadn't been about the usual rules. There was something about her, the woman with the wild laugh, the unsteady heels, the spark he couldn't quite explain. He shook it off, telling himself it had just been a rare lapse, a mistake, but somewhere, deep down, he knew better. She had gotten under his skin, and no amount of control could erase that. Caleb Whitmore had no idea who she really was that night, no clue that he had left behind more than a stolen memory, no idea that the silver bracelet he slipped onto her wrist, careless, thoughtless, would become a thread pulling him toward a destiny he couldn't yet imagine. 5 years would pass before their paths crossed again. 5 years before that reckless night would come roaring back, demanding to be reckoned with. For Elena Reed, the memory faded into the background of her life, a reckless escape tucked away like a story you barely believe happened. For Caleb, it was just another blurred night in a life full of blurred nights. They were both wrong, because that bracelet wasn't a souvenir, it was a key. And it was about to unlock a truth powerful enough to shake the foundations of everything they thought they knew. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. For now. Elena slipped back into her routine. Blissfully unaware, Caleb returned to his empire, never suspecting that fate had already started weaving them together again, thread by invisible thread. 5 years can change almost everything. And for Elena Reed, they had. She was no longer the exhausted, flustered yoga instructor barely keeping her head above water. Sure, there were still chaotic days like when her ancient car coughed its last breath on the way to class, or when a student accidentally spilled kombucha all over her favorite mat. But she had built something solid. Her yoga studio in Willow Creek had grown from a humble dream into one of the city's local gems, a place with waiting lists, loyal clients, and a reputation she was proud of. She had traded her tiny apartment for a cozy loft overlooking the winding waters of the Willamette River. She even slept through most nights, now peaceful, untroubled. Life wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and she liked it that way. The silver bracelet, still there. Resting lightly against her wrist, a habit, a quiet talisman. She told herself it was just a lucky charm, a small, harmless piece of the past she had chosen to keep. Nothing more. Everything was calm. Until Jenna Clark came storming into her life with yet another big idea. Jenna had landed a gig teaching a corporate wellness workshop in Seattle, and she needed a yoga expert to tag along. The client, Whitmore Technologies, some enormous tech company Elena had only vaguely heard of. Elena wasn't exactly thrilled at the thought of leaving her studio behind, much less teaching stiff executives how to breathe and stretch while they probably checked their emails under the mats. But Jenna was persistent. She promised free coffee, a nice hotel, a weekend away to clear her head, against her better judgment. Elena caved. She packed her mats, climbed into Jenna's car, and made the 3-hour drive north, never once imagining what waited for her there. The headquarters of Whitmore Technologies was a monolith of glass and steel gleaming, cold, impossibly intimidating. Elena felt hopelessly out of place, hauling her yoga gear through the lobby, her worn leggings, messy bun, and scuffed sneakers, a stark contrast to the sea of polished blazers and designer shoes. They led her to a conference room where a dozen bored-looking employees waited, shifting awkwardly on their mats. Elena plastered on a bright smile, the kind she had perfected over the years, and began the session, warrior pose. She was explaining halfway through, adjusting a participant's stance when the door swung open, and in walked Caleb Whitmore. She didn't recognize him at first, just a tall man in a sharp suit, dark hair neatly combed, an air of effortless authority clinging to him like a second skin. But when he turned, when their eyes met, something deep inside her jolted. She knew. Caleb had come to the session out of obligation, part of some employee morale initiative he barely cared about. He expected nothing. A room full of stressed employees awkwardly folding themselves into pretzels. But then he saw her, the instructor, a woman with a radiant smile and warm, familiar eyes. There was something about her that tugged at his memory, a faint echo he couldn't place. And then his gaze dropped lower, to her wrist, where a silver bracelet glinted in the fluorescent light. And Caleb Whitmore, a man who prided himself on control, on forgetting, felt his entire world tilt. The moment Caleb Whitmore caught sight of the bracelet glinting on her wrist, something stirred deep in his memory. It looked almost identical to a relic he had once seen in the dusty archives of Whitmore Technologies, an artifact tied to Harrington Holdings, the rival empire his family had helped crush decades ago. He shook off the unease, telling himself it was coincidence, and with practiced ease, he crossed the room and extended his hand. Caleb Whitmore. He said smoothly. Elena Reed froze, her breath catching painfully in her throat. That voice, that face. 5 years fell away in a heartbeat. It was him, the man from that night, the stranger she had thought she would never see again. For a moment, her brain short-circuited, her hand hovering awkwardly in the air. Finally, she managed a shaky smile and a whisper. Elena Reed. Their hands touched briefly, her grip barely there before she turned back to her class. Cheeks burning. Caleb didn't react. No flash of recognition. No narrowing of the eyes. Nothing. And somehow, that stung more than it should have. The rest of the session passed in a blur. Elena stumbled over her words, knocked over a water bottle, laughed too loudly at a bad joke. The employees chuckled politely, hiding their boredom. But Caleb stayed watching her, his expression unreadable, somewhere between amused and curious. When the workshop ended, Elena packed up quickly, desperate to disappear before the night unraveled any further. But Caleb lingered, as if he had nowhere else to be, as if she was suddenly the most fascinating puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "You run your own studio?" he asked casually, as she rolled up mats with trembling hands. She mumbled something about mindfulness and breathing techniques. Keeping her eyes glued to her shoes, all she needed was to slip away quietly, return to Willow Creek, and pretend none of this had happened. But fate had other ideas. Caleb's gaze drifted to her wrist again. "That's an interesting piece," he said, nodding toward the bracelet. "Where'd you find it?" Elena stiffened. She forced a laugh. Too bright. Too false. "Oh, just something random I picked up years ago." But Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he didn't quite believe her. "It reminds me of something from my company's history," he mused aloud. "You should stay a while. We could grab a coffee. Talk about it." She opened her mouth to refuse to make an excuse, to run, but Jenna, who had materialized at her side like a mischievous fairy godmother, nudged her sharply. "He's hot," Jenna whispered fiercely. "And rich. What's the worst that could happen?" Elena shot her a murderous look. But Caleb was already smiling, waiting for her answer with a patience that felt strangely personal. Cornered, Elena nodded. "Sure. Coffee. What could possibly go wrong?" Across the gleaming glass halls of Whitmore Technologies, danger was already stirring. Gloria Whitmore. Caleb's aunt, a woman of sharp suits and sharper instincts, had dropped by the conference center to check on her nephew's latest employee initiative. And when she spotted the yoga instructor's bracelet, her blood ran cold. She knew that design, those carvings. It wasn't just a random trinket. It was a Harrington family heirloom, a symbol of the empire her family had systematically dismantled 2 decades ago. Gloria's mind flashed back to a night wrapped in shadows, a night when, desperate to seal the Harrington downfall forever, she had orchestrated the quiet disappearance of the last remaining heir, a baby girl. That bracelet had been on the child's wrist. She remembered it clearly, because she had been the one who handed that baby over to strangers. Gloria slipped from the conference room, heels clicking sharply against marble, fury simmering under her perfect exterior. She dialed a familiar number. The line crackled once before her nephew answered. "Vincent," she said in a low, urgent whisper. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" Vincent drawled lazily from his office, sounding half amused. "The kind with a bracelet," Gloria snapped. "The girl, the yoga instructor. She might be her, the one we lost track of." Vincent laughed it off. "You think some barefoot hippie is going to take down Whitmore Technologies?" But Gloria wasn't smiling. "I saw the bracelet with my own eyes," she said coldly. "If she's the Harrington heir, she could have a legal claim to everything. And if Caleb finds out who she is, Her voice hardened into steel. "We need to get rid of her, before it's too late." Back in the conference room, oblivious to the storm gathering around her, Elena packed up her things. Caleb stood nearby, chatting about breathing techniques like nothing unusual had happened. Elena smiled weakly, playing along, even as her heart thudded painfully against her ribs, because deep down, a small voice whispered, nothing about tonight was coincidence. And somehow, this was only the beginning. Every time Caleb Whitmore's gaze flickered to her wrist, Elena Reed's heart lurched painfully against her ribs. He didn't remember. He didn't connect her to that night, the night that still lived quietly under her skin. And God, she was grateful for it. But there was something in his eyes, a spark, a faint, unspoken familiarity that made her stomach twist into knots. When he suggested coffee casually, like it was nothing, Elena found herself nodding before she could think better of it. Across the room, Jenna Clark caught her eye, winking exaggeratedly, mouthing, "Go for it." Elena groaned inwardly. She was in way over her head, and she didn't even know the half of it yet. As they walked side by side toward the company cafeteria, Caleb's stride easy and Elena's nerves buzzing under her skin. A pair of sharp eyes watched them from above. Gloria Whitmore, silent as a shadow, tracked their every move from a window overlooking the atrium, her mind already spinning, her plan already forming. Elena's bracelet, once just a reckless keepsake, was now a ticking time bomb strapped to her wrist, and she had no idea she was carrying a secret bigger and far more dangerous than she could imagine. 5 years ago, Elena had danced with a stranger to escape her broken pieces. Now, that stranger was pulling her into a world of ruthless power and cold ambition, and there was no turning back. What started as a simple coffee in the bright, glass-walled cafeteria of Whitmore Technologies soon spiraled into something much bigger. Caleb Whitmore was dangerous, not because of his wealth, not even because of the empire he commanded with a single phone call. No, Caleb was dangerous because he had a way of seeing her, really seeing her. His questions were disarming, gentle, but probing. He asked about her yoga studio, about her favorite poses, about the battered old car she still drove around Willow Creek. Elena stumbled through her answers, half laughing, half praying he wouldn't notice the way her hands shook when he smiled at her. She kept waiting for him to bring up the bracelet again, to stare too long, to remember, but he didn't. Instead, he asked if she could stay in Seattle for a few more days, said he could use her help brainstorming wellness initiatives for the company. Elena wanted to laugh. Her helping a billionaire CEO redesign corporate culture, ridiculous. But one look at Jenna's flood of giddy texts, "Say yes or I'll kill you," cornered her. So she agreed, telling herself it was just a weekend gig, nothing more. Caleb wasted no time. The next morning, he swept her into a sleek, high-rise conference room, eager as a kid showing off a secret fort. He talked about Whitmore Technologies like it was a living, breathing thing, their cutting-edge software, their global reach, the family legacy carved out from nothing. Elena listened politely, half lost in his passion until he mentioned it. Grayson Enterprises. He said, leaning back in his chair, "They were our biggest rival once. Tough competition. Until we buried them about 20 years ago. It got messy." Elena smiled politely, the name snagging somewhere in the back of her mind. Grayson. It meant nothing, or so she thought. She brushed it off, focusing on Caleb instead. Here, when he wasn't buried under layers of CEO armor, he was different, lighter, real, and that was more dangerous than any corporation or buried secret. Their time together stretched, not just meetings. He took her to a rooftop dinner overlooking Puget Sound, laughing about how it was payment for the yoga session. Elena, tripping out of the elevator in her borrowed heels, nearly fell flat on her face only for Caleb to catch her by the arm, steadying her with a laugh that made her cheeks burn, over plates of salmon and glasses of too much wine. They swapped stories. She swiped his phone trying to see one of his company's apps and accidentally closed everything. "You're a tech genius," he teased, chuckling as she swatted his arm in mock outrage. They laughed easily, naturally, like they had known each other forever, but every time his gaze flickered just briefly to the silver bracelet resting on her wrist. Elena's stomach twisted painfully. He didn't remember, and she wasn't about to remind him, but the pull between them, that invisible thread, was getting harder to deny with every passing moment. While Elena Reed was slowly, helplessly falling deeper into Caleb Whitmore's orbit, shadows were gathering behind her back. Gloria Whitmore wasn't about to let a yoga instructor unravel the empire she had spent her life protecting. She had buried the Harrington scandal 20 years ago, and she would not allow a silver bracelet and a forgotten heir to destroy everything she had built. In her private office, under low, heavy light, Gloria paced with predatory energy. Across from her, lounging carelessly on a leather couch, her son Vincent Whitmore looked unimpressed. "That girl," Gloria said. Her voice clipped, "is the Harrington child." She stopped, her hands clenched tight. "I took her from them when she was a baby. Handed her off to some nobody family in Oregon. If she figures out who she is, if Caleb figures it out, she could claim half of everything." Vincent shrugged lazily. "So make her disappear. Problem solved." Gloria's eyes gleamed coldly. The plan was already forming, precise and ruthless. They would start small, dig into Elena's past, push her out quietly, before anyone noticed, before Caleb noticed. Meanwhile, Elena moved through her days, oblivious to the danger circling closer, but some part of her, some deep, buried instinct stirred uneasily. The dreams had started after the workshop, strange flashes behind her eyes whenever she closed them. A sprawling house bathed in golden light, a woman's voice calling her name, the bracelet, glowing silver against tiny fingers. The dreams unnerved her enough that she called Jenna for advice, who breezily chalked it up to stress, too much wine, too much Caleb, whatever his name is. Jenna laughed, but the dreams kept coming, sharper, more insistent, whispering that there was something more, something she couldn't afford to ignore. On a whim, a half-desperate impulse, Elena booked an appointment with a psychic Jenna had once raved about, Isabel Quinn. It was ridiculous. She knew it was ridiculous. But still, she found herself pushing open the door to Isabel's cramped, incense-scented shop in downtown Seattle, her heart hammering painfully in her chest. The bracelet felt impossibly heavy on her wrist. Isabel Quinn was wiry, sharp-eyed, and unsettlingly perceptive. The moment Elena stepped inside, Isabel's gaze locked onto her wrist. She gasped. "Where did you get that?" she demanded, seizing Elena's hand. Elena stumbled through an explanation. "A guy. Years ago." "It's nothing." Isabel shook her head fiercely, tracing the intricate carvings with reverent fingers. "This is no trinket," she said in a low voice. "This is a Harrington heirloom passed through generations. You're tied to them." Elena laughed awkwardly. A mistake. Until Isabel's next words froze the air in her lungs. "You've got their blood," the psychic whispered. "I can see it, feel it. You're not just some lost girl. You are their daughter." Elena yanked her hand back, muttering protests, her heart slamming against her ribs. But Isabel's stare, unwavering and ancient, pinned her in place. Back at Whitmore Technologies, Gloria was moving swiftly. The private investigator she had hired returned with grim news. A thin file, an unsigned adoption certificate from 20 years ago, sketchy paperwork, loose ends that Gloria herself had left dangling. Confirmation, proof. Gloria didn't hesitate. Step up the pressure. She snapped at Vincent over the phone. Anonymous threats. Whatever it takes. We cannot allow Caleb to get too close. Vincent sighed dramatically, but agreed, his voice bored and cold. They would push Elena out before she became something they couldn't control. Before Caleb started looking at her the way he already was, like she wasn't just a fling, like she mattered. Gloria watched from afar, jaw tight, eyes narrowed, planning her next move. Every moment Elena stayed was a ticking bomb beneath everything they had built, and time was running out. Elena left Isabel's shop dazed, the psychic's words rattling around inside her skull like broken glass. It couldn't be real. It had to be ridiculous. And yet, the dreams, the bracelet, Caleb's offhand story about Harrington Enterprises, it all lined up too neatly to ignore. She drove back to the hotel where she and Jenna were staying, her hands trembling on the wheel. That night, as she sat curled up on the edge of her bed, Caleb's name flashed across her phone. "Come with me to the company party. It'll be better if you're there. Please." Elena stared at the message, her heart thudding. Every instinct screamed at her to say no, to run. But somehow the pull was stronger, and without quite understanding why, she typed back, "Okay, I'll come." Elena Reed arrived at the glittering Whitmore Technologies gala in a dress borrowed from Jenna Clark navy silk. Slightly too glamorous for her. A little too tight across the ribs, she felt like an imposter slipping into a world that wasn't hers, a world of polished smiles and whispered deals. But when Caleb Whitmore spotted her from across the room, his entire face lit up. Without hesitation, he crossed the floor, took her hand, and pulled her into the crowd like she belonged there. For a little while, bathed in laughter and champagne and the low hum of a string quartet, Elena forgot to be afraid. The party was in full swing, chandeliers burning bright, conversation buzzing when Gloria Whitmore made her move. She cornered Elena near the bar, her smile cold and predatory. "Lovely bracelet," Gloria drawled, her voice all sweet venom. "Where did you pick up that little thing?" Elena stiffened, every instinct flaring to life. "Just a gift," she said lightly, forcing a smile. Gloria's eyes narrowed, gleaming like a knife-catching light. "It looks expensive," she said, her voice too loud now, drawing curious glances from the surrounding guests. "You sure you belong here?" Wearing something like that, before Elena could stammer out a response, Gloria turned to the crowd with a sharp, artificial laugh. "Ladies and gentlemen, meet Caleb's new yoga friend," she called out, her words slicing through the air. "She's got exquisite taste in jewelry. Maybe she's after more than just inner peace." Laughter rippled through the crowd cold. Calculated, Elena's face burned hot with humiliation. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but Gloria waved her off with a dismissive flick of her manicured hand. The damage was done. The seeds of doubt had been planted. And then Caleb. He pushed through the crowd, his jaw tight, his eyes flashing. "She's here because I asked her to be," he said sharply, the steel in his voice silencing the room. He reached for Elena's hand, threading his fingers through hers, and led her away without another word. In a quiet corner, beneath the muted glow of a chandelier, he turned to her. "Don't listen to her," he said, his voice gentler now. "She's just trying to stir trouble." Elena nodded, swallowing hard. But Gloria's words clung to her like smoke. Why had the bracelet rattled Gloria so badly? Why did it feel like something was slipping just out of reach, something she should already know? She glanced at Caleb, at the way his hand still lingered against hers. He didn't know about that night 5 years ago, didn't know the truth Isabel Quinn had whispered. And yet, here he was, standing by her without hesitation. It was sweet. It was terrifying. It was something dangerously close to hope. As the night wore down, Elena slipped outside for a breath of cold air. The city skyline sparkled like broken glass beneath the heavy Seattle sky. She twisted the bracelet absently around her wrist, its silver surface catching the moonlight, and tried to silence the roar of questions in her mind. She didn't see Gloria standing on a balcony above, speaking urgently into her phone. "She's trouble." Gloria hissed into the receiver. "We need her gone. Tonight. Across town." Vincent Whitmore, tired, annoyed, but obedient, agreed. He knew better than to argue with his mother when her voice turned that cold. Gloria had a plan. And it was already in motion. Below, oblivious. Elena stood staring out at the city. Her heart twisted into knots. She was falling for Caleb. That much was undeniable. But the secrets swirling around her, the dreams, the bracelet. Isabel's warnings were beginning to feel like an anchor dragging her under. If Isabel was right, if she truly was the Harrington daughter, what did that mean for her? For Caleb, for everything she had no way of knowing. The storm was only just beginning, inside. Caleb found her. He brushed her hand with his fingers, smiled that small, private smile reserved only for her, and led her back into the warmth of the party, and she let him pretending everything was fine, even as the ground crumbled beneath her feet. Later that night, after the last toast, after the last dance, Gloria made the final call, her voice low and sharp as glass. "We're done playing nice. She's leaving. Tonight." Vincent sighed, but he didn't argue. Gloria Whitmore didn't lose. Not without a fight. Gloria Whitmore didn't believe in second chances, and she certainly didn't believe in leaving loose ends. That night, after the gala, humiliation failed to drive Elena Reed away. Gloria decided on something more persuasive. A late-night scare, nothing fatal, just enough to rattle her. Make her run back to whatever small town she came from. She contacted someone through old, shadowy connections, someone who didn't ask questions, gave him Elena's hotel address, told him to make it quick, back at the hotel. Elena paced the room while Jenna Clark snored lightly on the couch. Blissfully unaware, Elena couldn't settle, couldn't breathe right. Her mind spun between the softness of Caleb's smile and the dark, unsettling warnings from Isabel Quinn. She reached for her phone, thumb hovering over Caleb's number, when a noise outside the door made her freeze. Heavy, deliberate footsteps echoed in the hallway. The door rattled, the handle shifting, a shadow moving under the crack. Her heart slammed into her ribs. She rushed to Jenna, shaking her awake. "Someone's outside," she whispered. Jenna mumbled incoherently. Pulling a blanket over her head, the doorknob turned again. Panicked, Elena grabbed the nearest object, a lamp, wielding it like a weapon. Then her phone buzzed. A message. "You awake? I'm outside." Caleb, relief and confusion collided as she yanked open the door. Lamp raised like a knight with a sword. And there he was, Caleb Whitmore, in a rumpled jacket, standing in the hall with a startled look. "Whoa. Easy." He laughed, lifting his hands. "Didn't know I needed armor." Elena's legs almost buckled. The hallway was empty now. No shadow. No footsteps, but her pulse still raced. She dropped the lamp, grabbed Caleb's jacket, and yanked him inside. "What's going on?" he asked, frowning. It took her a minute to find her voice, and then, in a tumble of words, she told him everything: the dreams, the psychic, the bracelet, Gloria's poisonous comments. Caleb's face shifted from concern to something colder, harder. "Stay here," he said, before she could stop him. He was gone, checking the hallway, the exits. Minutes later, he returned, jaw tight. "No one's there," he said, "but we're not staying. Get your things." They drove through the rain-slicked streets of Seattle. The city, a blur of neon and wet asphalt. Elena sat silently in the passenger seat, clutching the bracelet like a lifeline. Caleb took her to Whitmore Technologies, to the one place he could control. They slipped into his office, locked the door. He didn't waste a second. "If you're tied to Harrington," he said, pulling open an old filing cabinet, "there'll be something here." He tossed file after file onto the desk, flipping through papers with a desperation he rarely showed. Elena joined him, her hands shaking, and then buried deep in a manila folder marked Grayson Acquisition, she found it. A faded photo, a baby, a tiny silver bracelet on a chubby wrist, and beneath it, a handwritten note, child removed. 1999, G.W. Her breath caught painfully in her chest. She traced the tiny wrist with her fingertip. Trembling, "This is me," she whispered. "Gloria Whitmore." Caleb said grimly, "G.W." He stared at her, at the photo, at the truth staring back at them. "You're not just anyone," he said softly. "You're the Harrington heir." Elena shook her head, overwhelmed, but the pieces clicked into place. The takeover wasn't just business. It had been a war, a cover-up. And Gloria had stolen her entire life to bury a name. Caleb grabbed her shoulders. "Steady and strong. We're figuring this out." He said, "She's not getting away with it." They stayed up all night piecing the puzzle together, bank transfers, coded memos, falsified documents, evidence that painted Gloria as the architect of it all. By dawn, the pile of proof was undeniable, enough to take her down, but Elena's hands still shook. "What if she comes after me again?" she whispered. Caleb squeezed her hand, fierce and certain. "She'll have to go through me first." The confrontation came faster than Elena could brace for. Caleb called an emergency board meeting at Whitmore Technologies, and he insisted Elena come with him. She felt absurd standing there barefoot yoga instructor among titans in designer suits, but Caleb stood beside her, solid, unshakable. And when Gloria Whitmore swept into the room, flanked by Vincent, smirking like a queen facing a minor rebellion, Elena didn't flinch. Not anymore. Gloria Whitmore entered the boardroom like a queen stepping into court, her chin lifted, her smirk carefully in place. She believed she'd already won. At the head of the long mahogany table sat Beatrice Whitmore, Caleb's formidable grandmother. Her sharp eyes missing nothing. Caleb didn't waste time. He slammed a thick file onto the table with a heavy, echoing thud. His voice, when it came, cut through the room like a blade. Gloria orchestrated the kidnapping of Elena Reed over 20 years ago. He said, "She's the Harrington heir, and these documents prove it." The room erupted. Vincent tried to laugh it off, lounging back lazily as if it were all a bad joke. But Gloria went white. "This is absurd," she snapped, voice rising. "Some yoga girl's fantasy. That's all." But Elena stepped forward, hands trembling slightly, holding the silver bracelet up like a banner. "This was mine," she said, her voice steady. "I wore it the day I was taken, and Isabel Quinn confirmed it." Caleb backed her, laying out everything. The photograph, the handwritten note, the bank transfers, the cover-up, piece after damning piece. Beatrice rose to her feet, her voice steel wrapped in velvet. "Gloria," she said, every syllable razor sharp, "you have disgraced this family. Elena deserves justice." Gloria lunged across the table. Furious. "You can't prove anything," she shrieked, but Vincent grabbed her arm, hissing under his breath. "Stop. Mom, it's over." Beatrice turned to the board. "I propose we recognize Elena Reed as the rightful Harrington heir," she said clearly, "and restore to her what should have never been stolen. All in favor." Hands shot up around the table, swift, unanimous, drowning out Gloria's allies. Gloria turned on Elena one last time, hatred burning in her eyes, but Caleb stepped between them, protective, immovable. "You're finished," he said quietly, Security moved in. Gloria screamed all the way down the hall. Vincent trailing behind her. Head bowed. The boardroom emptied, leaving only Elena, Caleb, and Beatrice standing in the quiet aftermath. Beatrice approached Elena and took her hand, her grip strong. "Steady. You're stronger than you know," she said, "and you belong here." Tears burned behind Elena's eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. This wasn't the life she'd planned. She hadn't come to Seattle searching for a legacy, but somehow it had found her. When Beatrice left, Caleb pulled Elena aside. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low, intimate. She nodded shakily. "Honestly, I don't even know who I am anymore." Caleb smiled gently. "You're Elena Reed," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "The woman who just turned my entire world upside down. And I wouldn't change a thing." Her heart caught painfully in her chest, and before she could second-guess herself, Caleb pressed forward. "I've been meaning to tell you," he said, his voice steady. "That night 5 years ago, I didn't know it was you, but I felt something." He took a breath. "I still do." He dropped to one knee right there, in the center of the emptied boardroom. "Marry me, Elena," he said, "not for Whitmore, not for Harrington, not for legacy, for us, because I don't want another day without you." The world tilted. The room spun. Elena stared down at him, at the man who had once been a stranger in a crowded ballroom, a wild, reckless memory, and now the anchor she hadn't known she needed. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, laughing through her tears, "Yes, I'll marry you." Caleb pulled her into his arms, kissing her like the world could wait, and for once it did. The boardroom, the empire, the past, all of it faded away, leaving only them. Two people who had found each other against impossible odds. But the story wasn't finished yet. Just as they stood there, wrapped in each other, Elena's phone buzzed. Isabel Quinn's voice crackled through the line. "You've found the truth," she said. "But there's more. Harrington's fortune isn't just wealth. It's power hidden away, locked in a vault that only you can open. Watch your back." The line went dead. Elena looked up at Caleb, her joy shadowed by new questions. He squeezed her hand, grinning with that dangerous spark she was starting to love. "Guess we've got another adventure ahead," he said. She smiled back, ready for whatever came next. Gloria Whitmore was gone, but the legacy she had tried so hard to bury was finally waking up. And Elena Reed, the girl who had once been lost, was standing right at its heart. The city stretched out below them, a glittering sea of lights bleeding into the velvet night. Standing there on the balcony of Caleb Whitmore's penthouse, Elena Reed let out a slow, steady breath. For the first time in what felt like forever, she could truly breathe. It had been a month since the storm at Whitmore Technologies, since Gloria Whitmore's empire of lies collapsed under its own weight, since Caleb had knelt in a boardroom and asked Elena to marry him. The chaos hadn't ended, not really, but the whirlwind had settled into something new, something steady, something real. Elena twisted the silver bracelet around her wrist, once just a reckless memory from a wild night, now a symbol of everything she had fought for, everything she had reclaimed, everything she had become. Behind her, Caleb stepped onto the balcony and slipped an arm around her waist. Elena leaned into him without hesitation, smiling at the familiar warmth of his touch. They had made it through the storm together. Life after the boardroom showdown looked different for both of them. Caleb was still CEO of Whitmore Technologies, still commanding boardrooms and headlines, but now he wasn't standing alone. Elena was beside him not just as his fiancée, but as his partner in every sense that mattered. The board had voted to separate the tangled assets connected to Harrington Holdings, and Elena Reed had taken charge of rebuilding her family's legacy. Harrington Enterprises was no longer a ghost from the past. It was her future. It wasn't easy. Stepping into a legacy she'd never known took grit she didn't realize she possessed. She hired a team, pored over dusty old ledgers, learned the ruthless language of business, and somehow, between strategy sessions that stretched into the early hours fueled by pizza, coffee, and Caleb's quiet steadiness, she built something real, something hers. Caleb grumbled about the long hours, about the endless paperwork, about the way she dragged him into late-night brainstorming sessions, but the way he watched her with a kind of pride that left her breathless, told her he wouldn't trade it for the world. And Beatrice Whitmore, Caleb's iron-willed grandmother, became Elena's fiercest champion. Every week, Beatrice insisted they come to dinner at her sprawling estate outside Seattle. Over roast chicken and too much wine, she shared stories of the Whitmores, of the Harringtons, of everything that had come before. "You've got fire in you, girl," Beatrice said one night, patting Elena's hand with surprising tenderness. "You and Caleb. You're going to do great things together." Elena blushed, still learning how to wear the feeling of belonging, but under Beatrice's watchful, kind gaze, it started to feel real. The legal battles wrapped up faster than anyone expected. Gloria Whitmore was charged with kidnapping, fraud, and conspiracy. Her empire collapsed in the cold light of a downtown courtroom. Vincent, eager to save his own skin, turned state's evidence and disappeared from the company overnight. Elena didn't waste tears on either of them. They had tried to erase her, and now they were paying the price. Through every hearing, Caleb was there, his hand steady in hers, his presence a quiet, unbreakable shield. When the judge's gavel fell, sealing Gloria's fate, Elena felt a weight she hadn't even known she was carrying finally lift away. It was over. She was free. But Isabel Quinn's last words still echoed in the back of her mind. There's more. A vault. A secret. Power buried deeper than anyone realized. Elena and Caleb had joked about it over glasses of wine, half laughing, half serious about treasure hunts and hidden vaults, but a small part of her couldn't help but wonder. The bracelet felt heavier now, as if it were still waiting, still guarding something unseen. They hadn't gone searching yet. Life was already full, balancing two companies, building a future, planning a wedding, finding a rhythm that was messy, beautiful, and wholly theirs. Elena glanced at Caleb beside her, the city lights painting soft gold across his face. He caught her staring and smiled, pulling her closer into his side. "What's on your mind?" he asked, voice low, warm against her hair. She smiled, resting her head against his shoulder, feeling, for the first time in her life, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. "Just thinking," Elena murmured, tracing lazy circles against Caleb's chest as they gazed out over the city. 5 years ago, I was stressing over yoga schedules, wondering if I'd ever find something bigger, and you were just a mystery man behind a mask." She smiled softly. "And now, here we are." Caleb chuckled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Best night of my life," he said, his voice low against her skin. Even if I didn't know it at the time, Elena closed her eyes, her heart impossibly full. It was true. One reckless moment, a single night of letting go had led her here, to him, to the truth of who she was, to a love she hadn't even dared to dream existed. Looking back, it felt impossible that it had all started with a dance, a laugh, a silver bracelet catching the light. It could have been nothing. A funny story she might have once told Jenna over bad wine and louder laughter, but fate had other ideas. That night had cracked open the path she was always meant to walk, a journey from yoga instructor to heir of a forgotten empire, from drifting alone to standing shoulder to shoulder with a man who had fought for her even before he knew her name. It wasn't about the fortune, or the companies, or the legacy etched into boardroom walls. It was about belonging. It was about a mistake, a wild or reckless leap that somehow became something beautiful. Caleb had seen her, truly seen her, and that was worth more than anything money could buy. Maybe that's the thing about those nights when you feel like the world is too heavy, when everything inside you says to stay safe, stay small. Maybe sometimes the leap, the terrifying, foolish, beautiful leap is exactly what leads you to where you're supposed to be. Elena's story had started with a dance, a bracelet, and a step into the unknown, and it had led her to love, to justice, to a legacy reclaimed, not stolen. Maybe we all have something hidden inside us, a piece of ourselves, just waiting to be found. Maybe it's the wildest risks that show us who we're really meant to become, standing there, wrapped in Caleb's arms. Elena didn't know what the future would bring. Challenges, for certain. Mysteries still unsolved, like the vault Isabel had whispered about. But whatever came next, she knew this. They would face it together. Elena had come to Seattle for a weekend job. She was leaving with a future bigger than she had ever imagined. A family, a purpose, and a love that had rewritten the very shape of her life. Caleb had found her, the one person who made his chaotic, ambitious world finally make sense. It had been messy, unexpected, imperfect, and absolutely, breathtakingly perfect. And if you loved this story, this tale of romance, redemption, and a little bit of fate, I hope you'll stay, because there are so many more stories waiting, stories that will warm your heart, challenge your soul, and maybe, just maybe, make you believe a little more in miracles. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Elena and Caleb might have found their happily ever after. But trust me, the best adventures are just beginning. Sometimes, the most unexpected journeys lead us exactly where we're meant to be. Elena Reed's story didn't begin with power or legacy. It began with a single reckless night, a dance, a bracelet, and a heart quietly searching for something more. What started as chaos turned into destiny, a lost heir rediscovered, a love forged through storms, and a future rewritten by courage. She wasn't just the woman who had once gotten lost in the crowd. She became the woman who stood at the center of it, stronger, braver, exactly where she was meant to be. And Caleb Whitmore, the man who once ruled the world alone, found something he never knew he needed. Someone to share it with. Together, they proved that sometimes the greatest adventures begin when you let go of fear and take a chance on fate. If this story touched your heart, if it made you believe even a little more in second chances and unexpected love, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. There are so many more stories waiting for you, stories about love, about hope, about finding your way when the road seems impossible. Thank you for being here, and until next time, keep believing that the wildest risks just might lead you home.